الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. From وظائف Ramadan, from the things to be done in Ramadan is feeding others. إطعام الطعام. And إطعام الطعام at all times, it's one of the good deeds, one of the great deeds that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Qur'an, and it's in the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam in many hadith. And إطعام الطعام is a special type of charity. Charity can be many forms. You can give money to someone, you can aid someone with something, smiling to a Muslim, this is a charity. But feeding others, specifically feeding others. And that's why when we follow the nusus, follow the wahy, we should not outsmart, if it's correct to say, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us, the nusus, the wahy. Our job is to understand it, not to go ahead and think that we know better the situation and the circumstances and the people now and the people then. These things, al-Islam صالح لكل مكان وزمان. This deen of al-Islam is fit and valid at all times, at all places. And all of the different thoughts that people might have, circumstances, it's already within the deen of al-Islam. It just requires for the person to seek knowledge and to ask the people of knowledge. So there's certain specific actions where it's only it'am. If it's fidya for someone that didn't fast because of a valid reason, permanent one, someone has permanent sickness, or a woman pregnant or breastfeeding and the next Ramadan came, or someone had the opportunity to make up the fast but they didn't and the next Ramadan came. It'am al-ta'am, for every day that a person break his fast, for those who are valid under these rulings, it's to reach the poor food. This is how the kafara is. You can say, but the poor, they will be better off with money. That's your opinion. This is your thinking. This is your own limited thinking. Shara', the deen is wahy. And if the nusus came very specific to feed, there was money at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. The same thing with the zakatul fitr, which is inshallah ta'ala, we'll talk about it later. The Prophet ﷺ specifically, directly mentioning zakatul fitr, sa'u min tamr, sa'u min sha'ir, food to be given, even specific types of food that can be stored, not cooked food, not meat, for example. Yes, there might be some differences of opinions, but when there's difference of opinions, we go back to how things are in the Qur'an and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, especially when a difference of opinions like this is adopted by the opinion of food, is jumhur al-ulama, the majority of the ulama. So, but this is something to be discussed later, inshallah. So there are certain ahkam, we're not into the context of talking about the different ahkam with it'am al-ta'am here, but to understand there are certain rulings, it would not work, the expiation or so, unless you give it as food. On the other side, there are certain things, charity, it is not permissible for you to choose to see that, oh, it's better for the poor to give him food when you are commanded to give money. Zakatul mal. The zakah is not permissible for a person to buy food with his zakah money to give it to the poor. And you would sometimes even hear some statements which is extremely and very wrong for someone to say that, as if a person knows what's the benefit of the poor more than the poor himself, right? So I'll give him food, because if I give him money, he'll waste it, he'll spend it. If you're talking about foolish people or insane people, that's a different situation. Yes, you can give it to someone in charge of them, they would spend on them. But for us to think, oh, I give him blankets, or I give him this, or they need of this, can we give zakah based on this? This is only in very dire need circumstances that are exceptional. The poor, there's no way for them to get money and to spend it. There's no value of money in their situation, for example. So this is extreme cases. So it becomes fatwa for a nazila, for a disaster that happened, but not the norm. The zakah is to be given to the poor as money. If he's poor, if he's someone from the 8 categories of the zakah, then to reach his hand as money. This is wahy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is not being rigid or not being flexible with the deen. This is the deen of Allah. And we are nothing but to understand the deen. This is not also for the individuals to interpret things the way they like. And some people might think that they're extreme versus those who are not extreme. This is ilm, this is knowledge, this is something to be studied, and of course we refer to the ulama in these matters. But the whole reminder of this that I wanted to mention is with regards to إطعام الطعام in general, especially in Ramadan, and hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, many, one of which is specifically for Ramadan, man fattara sa'iman, to give food for someone to break his fast with. At the time of breaking the fast, كان له مثل أجري. Prophet ﷺ, he said that the person giving the food, he will have the same reward as the fasting person. من غير أن ينقص ذلك من أجر الصائم شيئا, without diminishing any of the rewards of the fasting person. So he gets the full reward, and the one that gives the food gets the full reward, and this is the mercy of Allah. If you analyze it based on our human incapabilities, of course it doesn't work this way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nothing is the like of Allah. So someone is fasting and he gives food for someone to break his fast. Both of them, they get the full rewards of fasting, and someone gets the like of the reward of the fasting person. And of course, only a child would ask this question with all due respect. Well, that means I don't have to fast? If someone is in Ramadan, children sometimes ask these questions, right? So if I give someone food to break his fast, I get the same reward. So do I have to fast? Of course you have to fast, right? Because this is the reward is the like of this. Exactly the same concept of the salah in the haram, for example, in Mecca, is multiplied by 100,000 salah. Does that mean that a person, if he makes one salah there, that's it, he has no salah to the rest of his life? Of course, no one would understand it like this. This is in the rewards. And this is by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this ummah is chosen. This is the real chosen ummah, where the least of all of the nations in actions and the best of all of the nations in rewards. So the actual lifespan after 100 years from now, when we all return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, would look back at this life as what? As amal, actions. So who has more rewards is basically the one that lived longer with this concept. So someone get the multiplication of the rewards as if he lived for thousands of years to do these actions multiple times. But it's by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that bestows this matter upon the ummah, unlike the nations before, the people of Nuh and the like of this. And the a'mar of the ummah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, as he said alayhi salatu wasalam, بين 60 و 70. So the point here again, the month of Ramadan is an opportunity. It's a lifetime opportunity. اليوم, the day in Ramadan, يقاس بالعمر. It's measured by the entire lifespan, especially with Laylatul Qadr, for example. So that's why the importance of this with the good deeds, and for a person to continue for the rest of the year. But one of which is at-ta'am. And especially with this, it doesn't have to be, it's not like it's haram to give someone money to in Ramadan. This is something of more of a lenient situation. This is not zakatul mal, and this is not kafara. This is the general feeding of people, whether it's for people to eat, and this is what is meant, fattara sa'iman, or the person get means for them to break their fast. And the ayat in the Qur'an that talks about ta'am in general, sincerely done for the sake of Allah, not for show off or anything like this. ويطعمون الطعام على حبه مسكينا ويتيما وأسيرا إنما نطعمكم لوجه الله لا نريد منكم جزاء ولا شكورا. That they give the food for the poor and the needy and so on, that they do that seeking the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. They don't seek even any gratefulness or thanks from those who they give them the food of the charity. That's why, as mentioned before, some of the ulama, to perfect your sadaqah, do not ask the one that you're giving the food to even make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for you. Do not ask anything from the one that you give charity. Do not ask him that he remembers you later, or remember me in your dua, or in the heart that you want a favor from them. لا نريد منكم جزاء ولا شكورا. No recompense, no shukura. This is not what you seek. You don't seek for them to be thankful to you. Of course, on the other side, if a person did a favor for him, he should be thankful to them. But the one that is giving, this is not a conditioned thing for him to give or not to give, for people to thank. People do things for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, and that's a difference between a Muslim versus someone that is forgetful from the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So إطعام الطعام, especially in Ramadan, and the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام كان أجود الناس وكان أجود ما يكون في رمضان. The hadith of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, that he was the most generous of all people. And he used to, alayhi salatu wasalam, even more generous in Ramadan. So you can imagine how was the generosity of the Prophet ﷺ in Ramadan when Jibreel ﷺ would come and recite the Quran to the Prophet ﷺ. فَلَرَسُولُ اللَّهِ أَجْوَدُ مِنَ الرِّيحِ الْمُرْسَلِ. That the Prophet ﷺ is more generous than the blowing wind. And that's why the Imma, they say, as a result of this, as the hadith clearly states, a person should do extra generosity in the month of Ramadan, following the way the Prophet ﷺ, and one of which is the ta'am al-ta'am. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy for each and every one of us, inshallah. And in 10 minutes or so, inshallah, briefly before the shuruq, we'll talk about one of the adhkar that we usually go through on Sunday, inshallah. And no breakfast till Fajr, till after Maghrib, inshallah.